For decades, we've all been told this story. It's a story about a modern-day paradise, right? A place with huge salaries, incredibly safe streets, and this ultimate safety net provided by the state. We're talking, of course, about places like Scandinavia and Switzerland. They're dream destinations for so many professionals. But what if that dream, especially for the people who earn the most, has quietly turned into kind of a nightmare? What if the whole system isn't actually designed to make you wealthy, but to keep you just running in place? Today, we're going to explore a pretty provocative argument that this so-called utopia has become a very sophisticated financial prison. Okay, let's just dive right into the heart of it with a question that sounds, well, it sounds almost impossible. How on earth can someone earning what most of us would consider a fortune, we're talking over $100,000 a year, end up with barely enough money for a nice dinner out at the end of the month? And why are billionaires who used to flock to the safety of Swiss banks now suddenly packing their bags and leaving for places like Abu Dhabi? I mean, these aren't just random what-ifs. These are symptoms of a system that's starting to show some pretty serious cracks in its foundation. Now, let me be super clear. The benefits of this model are very real. You get strong social safety nets, amazing public services, and a general feeling of security. That's the dream part. But today, we're going to look at the other side of that coin. We're going to unpack the mechanics of this so-called trap by looking at three main pillars of the argument. First up, the brutal, and I mean brutal, mathematics of how a six-figure salary can just evaporate. Then we'll look at the illusion of prosperity, one that's built not on savings, but on absolutely staggering levels of personal debt. And finally, we'll touch on the quiet disappearance of financial privacy in our increasingly digital world. So let's start with the money itself, that promise of a big, fat paycheck. This is really where the trap is first set. You get offered a salary that sounds just incredible on paper, a number that makes you feel like, yes, I've finally made it. But the reality of what you actually get to keep and what you get to use is a completely different story. Let's break down the numbers, shall we? Okay, so imagine you're a skilled professional living in Norway. You land a fantastic job, and your monthly gross salary is 90,000 Norwegian kroner. Now, that's about 8,500 US dollars a month, so over $100,000 a year. By any global standard, that is a fantastic income. You'd immediately start planning, right? Thinking about saving, investing, maybe buying a nice apartment. It really feels like the beginning of true financial freedom. But that beautiful round number on your employment contract, it's just the starting line. Before that money ever really becomes yours, it has to pass through the gears of the system. And each one of those gears just shaves a little more off until what you're left with is almost unrecognizable. It's a process of, well, mathematical destruction. Okay, so let's follow the money. First, the taxman steps in. With tax rates hovering between 40 and 50% once you add in social contributions, your 90,000 NOK is instantly slashed to around 55,000. It's a huge hit right off the bat, but hey, it's still a decent amount. Next up is housing. A pretty standard apartment in a city like Oslo will easily cost you 18,000 NOK a month, so now we're down to 37,000. Then, of course, you've got to eat. And food prices in Norway are some of the highest in the world. Basic groceries will run you about 15,000 NOK, which brings our total down to just 22,000. And we still haven't paid for electricity, internet, or your bus pass. After those essentials, you're left with only about 5,000 NOK. So what does that 5,000 Norwegian kroner actually translate to? It's about 450 US dollars. Yeah. Let that just sink in for a minute. You started with a gross monthly income of over $8,500, and after the system has taken its cut for taxes and just basic survival, you are left with just $450 of your own money to spend. This is the absolute definition of the high-income squeeze. And this brings us to a really stark conclusion. In this kind of system, your role isn't really to build your own personal wealth. Your role is to be a conduit, a highly efficient vehicle for moving money from your employer through your bank account and straight to the government and big corporations. The money, it passes through your hands, but it never really sticks. You're simply carrying it for other people. Now, this brings up a really obvious question. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, if a highly paid professional has so little money left, how is everyone living in those beautiful Scandinavian homes, driving nice cars, and enjoying this amazing standard of living? The math just doesn't add up. Well, the answer, according to this argument, is simple. And honestly, it's deeply unsettling. It's all built on a massive mountain of debt. Let's just look at the data for a second. This chart shows us household debt as a percentage of the entire country's economic output, its GDP. And according to recent data, Switzerland is a world leader at a jaw-dropping 125%. Think about what that means. Private citizens collectively owe more money than their country produces in an entire year. Norway and Sweden, they're not that far behind. These are not signs of a wealthy population. They are signs of a population that's been encouraged to borrow, and borrow heavily, just to maintain a certain lifestyle. And here's the crucial point to understand. This lifestyle isn't being funded by savings or high disposable income. It's funded by access to what are called endless loans, mortgages that can span 40 or even 50 years. People can live in those amazing homes not because they can afford them, but because banks are willing to lend them huge amounts of money against their future paychecks. It creates this powerful illusion of prosperity, but it's an incredibly fragile illusion. The second interest rates go up, like they've been doing recently, that entire foundation can just crumble. And this leads to another really powerful way to think about it. In this system, a home isn't just a place to live, it's the main chain that ties you to the workforce. It is the golden handcuff. You might have the keys in your pocket, sure, but the bank and the system, they hold a claim on the next 3 or 4 decades of your work life. That house becomes your master. It dictates your career choices, how much risk you're willing to take. You can't just quit your job and start a business because that mortgage payment is always due. So we've got high taxes draining your salary and massive debt funding your lifestyle, but there's a third piece to this trap, and it's a much more modern one. For years and years, places like Switzerland and the Nordic countries were seen as these bastions of safety and privacy. But that is changing, and it's changing fast. Under the banner of convenience and modernization, a new system of total financial surveillance is being built. Let's just look at Switzerland for a moment. The legendary Swiss bank account, the symbol of privacy for centuries, it's effectively a thing of the past. A key part of this change was the Letta Act. This law basically requires that the true owner of any company in Switzerland has to be listed in a central government database. So the veil of secrecy has been totally lifted. The ability to discreetly hold your assets is gone. The system, it now sees everything. And this big push for transparency is happening at the same time as another major shift, especially in places like Sweden, the move towards a completely cashless society. On the surface, it's sold to everyone as a modern convenience. It's efficient, it's clean. But what's the potential reality? Well, from this perspective, it's a perfect mechanism for total financial surveillance and centralized control. Every single cup of coffee you buy, every bus ticket, it's all logged, tracked, and analyzed. And this creates the perfect infrastructure for what might be coming next, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The Nordic region is basically seen as the primary testing ground for this future. So, if the system is designed this way, to tax you heavily, load you up with debt, and monitor every transaction, is there a way out? Is it even possible to achieve real financial freedom anymore? Well, according to this line of thinking, the answer is yes. But it means you have to stop playing the game by their established rules. It requires an escape plan.
What's really telling is to just watch what the wealthiest people are doing. They have the most to lose, right? So they act as a kind of early warning system. We've seen this exodus of billionaires from Norway, who first moved to Switzerland. But now, with Swiss privacy basically gone, they're on the move again to places like Dubai. And why? Because they recognize that in the old system, they're no longer seen as productive people to be supported, but as prey to be hunted by ever-increasing taxes and rules. They're opting out.
Now, for those of us who aren't billionaires, a similar but more accessible strategy is proposed. Step 1. Tax arbitrage. It sounds fancy, but it just means unlinking your income from your physical location. Think of a graphic designer who lives in a low-tax country but serves clients all over the world. Their income isn't tied to a high-tax system. Step 2 is a philosophy of minimalism and autonomy. Instead of chaining yourself to decades of debt just to own stuff, the focus shifts to building a portfolio of assets that work for you. Let your money own assets, don't let your assets own you. And third, using technology like an AI guardian, an automated system that makes financial decisions based on pure data and logic, shielding you from the emotional hype or fear the system wants you to feel. And this quote just perfectly sums up the entire argument. That high salary? It's the bait. It's the comfortable blanket the system uses to lull you into a state of, complacency. And while you're asleep, focused on your career and making that impressive gross income, your actual wealth, your savings, your purchasing power is being quietly siphoned away through the back door by the twin thieves of inflation and taxes. So all of this leaves us with a final and I think crucial question. Maybe our whole definition of wealth needs an update. Maybe the ultimate status symbol isn't a six-figure salary or a fancy job title or a beautiful home in a cool city. Maybe, just maybe, the ultimate luxury in the 21st century is simply autonomy. The freedom to choose which rules you play by, which system you participate in, and ultimately, the freedom to build a life where you're the one who truly owns your time and your labor.